Hello, my fellow heathens. This is your host, Dr. Jerry Jaffe, the world's most highly educated stand-up comedian. And it is my pleasure to be with you today. I'm going to be sharing my interview with John Poveromo with you in a few minutes. Before I get to that, let's do a little housekeeping. The last episode I released of the Comical Heathen was a behind-the-scenes look at my recent run for city council in the town that I live in, Painesville, Ohio. I might add my recent unsuccessful bid for city council. That was fine. I had a great time, met a lot of great people. And I had a couple of my good friends, Jeremy Shear and Dan Brown, record an interview with me where they asked me questions about what it was like. So please go listen to the last episode if you haven't already. During that episode, I did make a tentative, half-hearted, ill-advised announcement that I was doing the Comical Heathen live show at the County Arts Center in Toledo, Ohio, January 29th. And even when I said those words on the previous episode, I said, yeah, but with Omicron around, I bet it gets canceled. And so I get to pat myself on the back and be glad for being a genius, but sad for the fact that that show has been canceled. I'm in communication with the venue. They do want to have the show. We'll probably bring it back later in the year in the spring when things are a little less Omicron-y. Sorry about any confusion generated around that. Of course, if any of the 12 people who listen to this podcast would like me to bring the live show to wherever it is you are living, send me a message at comicalheathen@gmail.com and let me know. If I know there's even one person in their town that would come and see the live show, then that would be worth coming out to wherever you are. So be sure to let me know. Now, the interview I'm about to share with you is with a comedian called John Poveromo. I met John under kind of unusual or interesting circumstances. I took part in an event. I am actually now a footnote to history. A lot of the Jaffes throughout history are footnotes to history. Like you may not know, but when an astronaut took Tony Packo's chili sauce into the space shuttle, into outer space, into orbit, that was the first time a meat product had been served in outer space. And you might not know, but Tony Packo's chili sauce is manufactured in a meat processing plant owned by Jaffes. So there you go. Once again, a Jaffe is a footnote to history. Well, in this case, I was a footnote to history because in January of 2020, I believe January 22nd, and then for the next few days, my good friend Mark Riccadonna and his podcast partner Richie Burns decided to take their podcast, Drinks, Jokes, and Storytelling, to Twitch in an attempt to break the world record for a stand-up comedy show streaming stand-up comedy show. A record they did indeed set at that time. Of course, to get 4+ days of continuous streaming comedy, they need hundreds of comedians to join them. And heck, I'm good friends with Mark and some of the other people, so I was on for a while. And, yay, I contributed. Yay, I contributed. Besides contributing my footnote to Mark and Richie's historic accomplishment, I met a lot of other comedians doing that fun and unusual, event, one of whom was John Poveromo. So I actually interviewed John in February, and it took some time to get the post-production on this one done. Nothing to do with John. He's the best, and he is hilarious. And you should definitely follow him on Instagram because he not only is so funny, but he is an artist and posts like doodles and drawings and things. I bought one of his t-shirts. It was original t-shirts. Fantastic. So there was a little bit of a delay. When I went into campaigning mode in fall of 2021, the podcast went on hold, so I didn't even do an episode for like almost 6 months. So nothing to do with John or his wonderfulness, just me and my life management, time management skills. This is a great conversation. I'm going to preview it and I'm going to play it, but there is one thing I wanted to touch on. I have dedicated season 2 of the Comical Heathen to critical thinking skills. And there was something in the news lately which caught my attention. I'm not even going to do a full rant. I just want to point at it and go, aha. And this was the headline that I noticed. Several news outlets reported on this. I just happened to catch the Washington Post headline first. That's what I'm going to use to get my conversation rolling for a couple minutes. Alex Jones must pay damages to Sandy Hook families in another defamation case, judge rules. So, InfoWars' own Alex Jones has been involved in many defamation cases for his various conspiracy theory-oriented claims about crisis actors, and Sandy Hook was all staged, and other things of that nature. And people who's had their lives affected by these claims have started suing him. What I noticed when I saw this headline was that he's lost all these. He hasn't won any of these defamation cases. He's had numerous, what is called in the legal profession, default judgments. A default judgment is when a judge is waiting for the defendant to, it could be the plaintiff, produce their evidence so that they can go to court, like to set a court date. There's like pre-setting a court date, they get organized. And Jones and his lawyers are just consistently not cooperating. They're applying for extensions, but never, producing anything or actually appearing and are doing their part of their defense. And a judge is eventually put into a position where they have to make a default judgment. So there have been, just in 2021, at least 4 of these default judgments against Alex Jones. I went to his Wikipedia page just so I could see it all in one place, and I doubt this is everything because I know of more than what is listed here. But in February 2017, he was ordered to apologize and retract his allegations that the owner of Comet Ping Pong Pizzeria was, part of the Pizzagate conspiracy theory. Jones had to issue in 2017 an apology against the Chobani Yogurt Company for trying to link them to child sexual assault and other things. He lost a case in 2018. He lost a Sandy Hook case in 2018. So he is losing case after case after case. But this reminded me of something. On January 6, USA Today published an article. I shared this on social media, so you can go look it up. Here's what the headline says. It says USA Today, January 6, 2021. By the numbers, President Donald Trump's failed efforts to overturn the election. Now, you might think that I'm about to, pile on Donald Trump. And there's so many comedians like Stephen Colbert and John Oliver and Jimmy Kimmel and others who do such a good job. That's not even where I'm going with this. I did do a gig over the summer, and I was featuring, and it was fine. And after one of my sets, a table of old, that sounds derogatory. Yeah, I'm going to rephrase that out of respect. A table of silver-haired citizens came over to my little booth where I was trying to sell my merch. Buy a coffee cup on my Etsy shop. I'll put a link. It came over to me and said, you shouldn't tell Donald Trump jokes. Just lay off. And then they even walked away like they didn't want to talk about it. They just wanted to scold me. So I was scolded, The joke I told had to do with his grab him by the pussy comment, which he said. And I actually talked to Lewis Black about this when I interviewed him. Check that interview out if you haven't. Yes, I interviewed Lewis Black. Thank you, Mr. Black, for your time. But he was like, he's been doing comedy for decades. And people know you can make fun of the president. You make fun of Bush, you make fun of Obama, you make fun of Clinton, you make fun of Reagan. Comedians make fun of the president. Occasionally, ardent supporters might take umbrage, but the idea that Trump supporters have that you can't tell a Trump joke, that's somehow attacking the president or inappropriate or unfair, that's like new. What I'm really talking about is, I saw headline about Alex Jones losing so many court cases, and he hasn't won one yet. And then I saw this headline about Donald Trump's failed efforts. And Donald Trump, after the last election, his lawyers filed a number of lawsuits. How many lawsuits, you might ask? According to USA Today's January 6 article, up to that date, 62 election-related lawsuits. How many defeats did he have? 61 election-related lawsuit defeats. Now, some cases were dismissed for lack of standing. Others were based on merits. Decisions have come from Democrat-appointed and Republican-appointed judges, including federal judges appointed by Trump. The lone victory, it was a small one, a Pennsylvania judge sided with the Trump campaign, ruling that voters could not go back and cure their ballots if they failed to provide proper identification 3 days after the election. The ruling, in effect, affected very few actual votes and did not change the outcome, which Biden won by 81,000 votes. So his one victory was a very minor one indeed. Now, if I'm not here to bury Trump, why am I mentioning this? I'm linking it to Alex Jones because all the Alex Jones losses and all the Trump losses have a thing in common, my fellow heathens. They have a thing in common. Lack of evidence. Yes, that's right, you heard me. Trump's cases kept getting dismissed and thrown out and failing for lack of evidence. Judge Parker said of Trump's lawyers' claims that they were nothing but speculation and conjecture. Several judges have scolded Trump's team for wasting the court's time for bringing cases without any evidence. Some judges have filed actions against the lawyers for abusing the judicial system. One judge, Judge Parker, ordered pro-Trump lawyers to reimburse election officials for the cost of defending these lawsuits. When you are going to a court case, both sides are supposed to present evidence. that it's an exercise in debating of evidence. You're supposed to bring evidence. Well, there's a saying in critical thinking circles, extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. Alex Jones claimed that the Sandy Hook victims were crisis actors. Trump and his lawyers claim that Joe Biden stole the election through election fraud. Those are very extraordinary claims, my friends. Let's see the evidence. A claim without evidence is like pie without filling, dry and disgusting, and nobody wants to eat it. And let's make another thing clear that my conspiracy theory friends sometimes get confused about. In logic, there's an expression which is burden of proof. So when we say extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, it is the person making the extraordinary claim who is obligated to bring that evidence. Do you hear me, QAnon? I'm looking directly at you, Ted Cruz. Can't even deal with InfoWars. You've got to have the evidence. One of the most annoying things is when someone making an extraordinary claim says back to you, well, you prove it. Someone says they believe in Bigfoot, and I say, hey, man, that's cool. Show me some evidence. And they say, well, show me the evidence that Bigfoot doesn't exist. That's not how it works, my friends. When you make a claim about Sandy Hook victims or election fraud or Bigfoot, you must be the person providing the evidence. You can't flip it around. It's not a record album that you turn over to the B-side. When you say there was election fraud, you got our attention. You are the A-side of the record. Let's play it to the end and see what kind of music you have. All right, well, that was just a little ditty based on these headlines that were both about these fraudsters losing all their cases because of lack of evidence. Evidence, my friends. That's what we want. We want evidence. Well, I have some evidence for you. Evidence that I actually spoke to John Poveromo. And if you're a John Poveromo fan or if you're just meeting him today, it's a very fun, lively conversation. It had the real green room vibe of just comedians hanging out, talking about comedy. I met John on that record-setting live stream. And I reached out to him afterwards. Hey, I want to interview you. And he's very gracious. He's very fun. He's very funny. A couple things we talk about. We talk about satire. We talk about his beginnings in comedy. We talk about what it was like to do that live stream. I was on for like half an hour. He was on for most of it to the point where he was hallucinating at points. I'll let him tell you about that. We both like to do crowd work, so we do get into a thing about his approach to crowd work and that kind of thing. And I always ask comedians if I have a chance what advice they would give beginners on satire. And I'll just tease you that his comments on that part of the conversation were really engaging, really helpful too. So instructive. So without any further ado, here is my interview from February of 2021 with John Poveromo. All right, so let me take a deep breath and sort of introduce you, and if I mispronounce your name, correct me, because people always mispronounce my name.
Right.
So it's Poveromo?
Yeah, it's Poveromo, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of is pronounced the way it looks once you think about it for a second. It's a very phonetic name.
It's never that hard, and people are always like, how do you say it? And they add other letters in there, and
yes.
They're trying to figure shit out, and I'm just like, you know what? That's not necessary.
Hey, well, the voice you hear is John Poveromo, no extra letters necessary. And we have something in common, which is people commonly mispronounce our names. I'm your host, Dr. Jerry Jaffe, not Jeffrey, not Joffrey, not the Joffrey Ballet, and Jaffe can go fuck himself. Jerry Jaffe, but let's talk about our guest. Welcome, John. How are you?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Excellent. Thanks for doing this interview and this conversation with me. This is the Comical Heathen podcast where we talk about satire and comedy and religion and anything else you want to talk about. Let's just make sure that people know who we're talking to. So, John, you're a comedian. How long have you been doing comedy?
I've been doing comedy for 15 years.
15 years? So you started when you were 8? If you haven't seen John, he looks very youthful.
I started when I was 20.
Where at? You're introduced as being from New Jersey. Is that where you're from?
No, I'm actually from Brooklyn.
Okay.
I was born in Brooklyn, and I grew up in New Jersey, but I moved around a lot. I was born in Brooklyn. I lived in Arizona for 4 years. I say I didn't. My parents lived in Arizona, and I was between jobs, so I was staying with them. But then we moved back to Brooklyn for a little bit, and then we lived in Arizona, and then we lived in New Jersey, and then from that point on, I kind of grew up in New Jersey. But no, I started in New York. I started stand-up in New York, in the clubs in New York.
So you were 20 years old in New York. What were you doing? when you were 19 and a half?
Dude, I was in New York all the time. Like, even before I started doing stand-up, like, as soon as I got a car, my friends and I would drive into the city all the time.
Okay.
Our town is fucking boring as shit. So we were like, let's just go. Well, we didn't do anything, like, too debaucherous either, though, when we were in it was, like, high school. So we would go on the weekends and, like, make excuses to go into the city. But we just wanted to be anywhere but where we live. So we were like, oh, we're going to go to the city, and we're going to go to this museum. And we did. We would go, like, South Street Seaport, walk all over the city, go to Central Park, like, go to the fucking museums and weird places. And
so when did you get interested? When did you get interested in comedy? How did that, like, comedy bug start for you?
Comedy I've been interested in since I was in, like, elementary school. In 6th grade, we had these fake yearbooks, because nobody gives a fuck about a 6th grader graduating.
Right.
But we did. We had to put down, like, we made these, like, faux yearbooks or whatever. And I put down, I wanted to be either a comedian or cartoonist, because I always used to say, I've never had any intention of making money. So those are the only two, like, career goals I had. But I was interested in comedy from a super young age, just because I was a huge fan of Robin Williams growing up. And then because it was like he did the voice of the Bat in Fern Gully. And so when you're a kid, that the Bat in Fern Gully is fucking hilarious because it's Robin Williams. And then, the voice of Genie in Aladdin. And then all of a sudden you see Morgan Mindy and it's that same voice, same guy. You're like, holy shit, it's that guy. And then if you do a little bit more digging, you're like, oh, he started out in stand-up. What the fuck is stand-up? Okay. So then it became this, you know what I mean? Like,
he like regressed through the reverse history of Robin Williams and landed at stand-up comedy.
Yeah, exactly. And everybody from that era, everybody on TV was a comic at some point in time. So Ellen, Paul Reiser, Jerry Seinfeld, Tim Allen, Roseanne Barr, anybody with a fucking TV show was a comic at some point in time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not 100% sure. I will say I'm old enough, John, I'm a little older than you, that I remember, and this is not like a false memory, I swear to you, I remember seeing Robin Williams' guest appearance on Happy Days and it blowing my mind. Like, I saw it in real time on television. And, like, there's some, like, wow, some charisma, comedy, changed up the energy of the show, but his appearance on Happy Days was remarkable.
Yeah.
And then I think it was Gary Marshall realized, like, that guy should have a show. Like, he got such a big reaction from one appearance. They brought him back a second time, but his first appearance, they already knew, like, we got to do something with this guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're 20, the first time you got on stage to try comedy?
Yeah, first time I got on stage, I was 20.
How did that go?
Well, actually,
Yay!
But it's a weird way to start out when you do well the first time because you have no idea what happens every other time you go on stage. You're like, I don't understand. Yeah. So it was very bizarre. Yeah, my first time on stage was at Caroline's on Broadway.
Okay.
And I did 5 minutes of material, and I was basically like it was a great time. I just had a lot of energy when I was on stage, and I had good material for first time on stage or whatever. I got a bunch of laughs.
Right.
It went over really well. Right after that, the next time I was on stage, I bombed. Because I was like, still like, I had to do 10 minutes, which was hilarious. Because somebody had left or didn't make it to the show. And whoever was, I think it was Lori Sumner at the time, was booking the shows at Gotham, like at the New Town or whatever. She was like, hey, so-and-so left. Can you do 10 minutes? And like an idiot. Of course, I mean, every comic, but I was like, can I do, yeah, sure. I can do 10 minutes. And I was like, I was hilarious the first time. Why wouldn't I be?
Sure, this is easy.
Yeah. And I had like notes of like my dumb set and like some material I thought I would do, and then the other ones, it just did not go over well.
Right.
And then after that, it was like hit miss, hit miss, hit miss, hit miss.
And as a child of the 70s, I was inspired by, especially in my wanting to try comedy, the storytelling styles of Bill Cosby.
Oh,
and so I would do stories, like my whole 5 minutes would be one story.
Right.
And I had this seventh or eighth time on stage. I told this story. I won't do the whole thing now. It probably wasn't really that funny, but it was about, I've been to Guam a couple times, and it was about something that happened to me in Guam. So it was interesting. I put some jokes in, and it went pretty well. Again, 7th, 8th time on stage. Mm-hmm. And then 2 weeks later, same open mic, I go up and try to do the same story, but it wasn't 5 minutes long anymore. Like, it was going long. I was getting the light, and I couldn't understand. Because in my brain, I was saying the same words in the same order, at the same way I practiced it. And no one was laughing at any of the little jokes.
Right.
So like time was stretching out in every direction against me. Like
the storytelling stuff is so, I mean, I always admire, like, to be able to go on stage and try to tell a story
Right.
when no one knows who you are, because
Yep.
like when Cosby does it,
Sure.
it's fine. You're like, everybody knows him.
Yep.
You have no choice. You've spent the money,
Yep.
and it's a lot of money, and you're
Yep.
sitting in that audience, so you kind of go along with it. But
Yep.
when it's like an unknown comic at a club, and they're like, "I'm going to tell you about Guam," and they have no idea who you are, so they have no idea how to react to that story anyway.
Yes.
It's
Yep.
just, it's like layers of difficult.
Well, I'm gonna give you a compliment. You're very good. You're very funny, but I want to say you're really good at is the turn. Your punchlines going in unexpected directions are very good. I want to just say that.
Thank you.
And one of your videos has like a thing where you start talking about how Trump says stupid things, but then when you get to like your punchline, it's about how your generation shouldn't be given guns. Like it's not a
Right.
joke about Trump at all. It's a joke about people with anxiety. So it was just like an example of a very unexpected turn.
That was always kind of one of my favorite ones to do at the time. You know, I was probably, and at this point now, hopefully we won't need it anymore.
Right.
Change it up a little bit eventually. But like, yeah, that was always one of my favorite things to do, because we'd do some Trump material in the beginning, and then I figured people would understand. People would just assume that was the direction I was going in, and I hate that.
Right.
It's like one of those things where like, I love the audience. They're
Right.
great. I don't have like that really visceral relationship with them anyway, but I do get annoyed. Like I do have a little still bit of like the comedian fuck you in there.
Yeah.
Where you're like, oh, if you think you know where I'm going, I will either sabotage my own bit, or I will do the twit. Like
Yeah. To go back in time a little bit, saying I've watched a bunch of your videos in the past few weeks since we met. You're part of
Yes.
do we call it a podcast? Jokes and storytelling? Drinks
I
and
don't even know.
storytelling?
Yeah, well, the podcast is Drinks, Jokes, and Storytelling.
Thank you. Jokes and storytelling.
Yeah, and it's on Twitch. That's the
Right.
channel that we have on Twitch, and we have like a little bit of a network thing. But
When you
yeah,
say we, who's your partners or co-hosts?
there's a bunch of us. There's Mark Riccadonna, Richie Byrne, Jason Pollock, Vinny Nardiello, James Oakes, Justin Gonzalez.
Okay.
But he's not even a comic. He's funny, a funny dude, entertainer, opera singer, travel the world,
Okay.
classier than us.
Sure. You need one of those.
Yeah, we need somebody to bring up the
Right.
class. It's all of us together, and we have our producer Tom Banas, who I think what we're going to talk about is that event is organized the whole. Basically, came up with the idea to do charity event. Like he used to be a live events coordinator before the pandemic.
Okay.
He still is, but we're all waiting to go back to work.
Right.
He knew these two charities really well, the Children's Brain Tumor Foundation and Star Treatments, and then was like, why don't we combine our efforts and do something for them? And then it became, Justin did a 24-hour telethon to raise money for MS, which he has. Tom was like, well, what's the world record for the longest stand-up telethon thing or whatever? He looked that up, found out it was 80.5 hours, was like, let's fucking beat it. And then we did the charity event combined with that and never left the internet.
Right. So you did like a
You know?
5-day long show. How long was how long was your record?
90 something hours. I think I want to say like 93 maybe.
So first of all, congratulations to you and the team.
Thank you.
And also for all the
Yeah.
fundraising that you did as well. I'm just trying to imagine in this like media age, internet age, what is the record called? I know there's a record for the longest live stand-up show because Hilarities in Cleveland used to have that record.
It's the world record for the longest streaming comedy show.
Okay, so that is part of the record's title.
Yeah, streaming is part of the title.
Okay, excellent. Congratulations. I know some of the guys you just mentioned, but in particular, I'm comedy brothers with Mark Riccadonna.
Yes.
I'm from Ohio. He's from Ohio. He escaped Ohio. I escaped Ohio but came back.
It's crazy because I feel like out of the two of you, I would be like, oh yeah, no, you seem like you're from Ohio, and Mark seems like he was born out of an Italian sausage cart. Like,
Right.
That's where
Yes.
Like,
People in Little Italy are telling him it's a bit much, Mark. You know.
yeah.
So Mark did drag me in. So I was on for a couple of hours with you guys.
Yes.
Thanks for including me. I had a good time, and
Of
also
course.
meeting a bunch of people, some new people. So was there any moments that stand out? I mean, it's 5 days. There must be any guest, any joke, any moment, any weirdness.
Yeah, there's a couple. So one of the best ones, for sure, was when Big J Okerson was on. It was like 5 o'clock. I don't know why he chose 5 a.m. I didn't even know comedians got up at 5 a.m. But I happened to be up anyway because that was the day I stayed up 24 hours straight.
Okay.
A little over 24. So I was just passing by the 5 o'clock hour, and Jay Okerson was on, and he was on with his ex-wife Carla. Actually, they're not technically divorced yet.
Okay.
but they've been separated for years. Carla's boyfriend, like a smattering of a few other people, right? And one of them being Jason Pollock, one of the guys from our channel. And I don't know what Jason's known Jay for a long time. Jay, and
Okay.
everybody knows Jason because Jason books a ton of rooms and dabbled in stand up and stuff. So out of the blue, Jason just goes, "Now Jay, how do you know Carla? Carla, are you brother and sister, or?" I mean, with the straightest face, and I literally without I just went, "What the fuck?" And everybody starts laughing, and Jay just goes, "I have a 19-year-old daughter with her," and then Jason's just like, "Oh, and then he realizes what he's done,
Right.
and then it was. I mean, the amount of shitting on Jason we did after that was hilarious. But that was a great, just and also it came on the heels of them all talking about it.
Right.
Like making jokes about it and talking about their daughter, and Jay going, "Carla, would you just give me the divorce papers already?" This
Right.
shit. And Jason is just a bizarre he's hilarious, and he's always got these little non sequiturs, and that one just fucking crushed us. My favorite thing is when there's just a bunch of us on screen at the same time and we're all shitting on each other,
Right.
playfully, obviously, but it's always a lot of fun to do. We had a couple glitches that were just hilarious. Rick Overton in the very beginning couldn't get on, and just kept buffering, just couldn't get on. It kept buffering, screen kept buffering, couldn't get his camera to work. And I was like, this is just an entire improv bit on how bad the internet, you know what I mean? So we were just joking about that. Yeah, there was a lot of good moments. But one of the best things that stood out to me was every time somebody, just how much it meant to them to see everyone, which we thought it would be a lot of fun. We just trying to beat the record was going to be amazing. And then slowly but surely, each time people came on and comedians came back on again. There's a lot of comedians that just came to see who was on, hang out. They were watching the stream constantly. And then every now and again, each one of them would be like, "You have no idea how much I needed this, just to see everybody." It just became the biggest backstage hang that no one knew we all needed. Everybody knew we missed stand-up, missed each other, but seeing everybody on the screen at the same time, and how many people wanted to come in and just to be in the fucking room with other comedians, that meant a lot. That was the standout thing for me.
Well, I dipped in every day, and was on at one point, but I dipped in every day, watched you guys, saw who was on, occasionally texted in, whatever. But it did start to come across as the world's largest green room. It was just hundreds of comedians hanging out.
Yeah.
So I was looking at your bio, and I'm going to turn our attention to the theme of the podcast a little bit now, which is satire. I see you've done a lot of television writing, including for some of the news networks like HLN and Fox.
Yeah.
How do you, approach writing, or what's that like? I'm sure each job was a little different, so it might be hard to generalize, but, what's your approach as a comic writer when you're writing material for the news shows?
It's hard to clarify that in a bio sometimes, but the misconception is that I was writing for the anchors, but that's not the case. It was segments. I know you know this, but other people nobody understands, because they're always I'll get audience members who ask me how did you write for what part of CNN did you? And I'm I didn't there's segments that they have. So anything that they have was usually for other comedians. So usually it's hey, we're doing this, we're hosting this segment. Here's block A through D.
Okay.
And these are the topics we're covering, and we need 15 jokes on each one, and then and then the last minute.
Right.
So God, I did that directly for about 3-4 years, all the shows, every sport, ESPN. Fox was mostly I wrote for a dude who used to have to be the liberal punching bag for Hannity when he would pop on a Hannity. There's no winning on that show. Everybody shouted over you.
Right.
And it was really frustrating as a writer. That's where I learned to that your jokes are probably not going to make, you're going to put all this work into stuff.
Right.
But unless your guy who's going on, who's getting those opportunities, can fight that fight.
Right.
Your jokes are not going to get hurt.
Right. Yep.
Or sometimes he didn't have a choice either. It was they don't let you, whatever it is, they may move on. And that was frustrating for me, because that was the only time, I'm not a sports guy, but that was the only time I think I remember sitting down screaming at the television, or trying to send jokes in the middle of the program.
Sure.
So they're, whatever, where I'm they're lying about that, you got to say this. So yeah, that was kind of frustrating. And then at that point, I think I learned to distance myself from that part of it, not watch the show.
Okay.
In the beginning, you're like, oh my God, I really care. I want to see if my joke lands and if they deliver it correctly
Right.
and if it
Yep.
gets on TV. Then after that, I was like, I don't fucking care anymore. Just give me the money.
Right.
And I hope the jokes, if they're
Right.
funny, they're funny. But yeah, so that was kind of like how that works. You learn to write quickly
Sure.
because those blocks change fast. Topics can change.
Okay.
Sometimes you don't get them until 2 hours before the show is.
Sure.
So it's like you're waiting, and you're like, are they? And it's funny because like you're the guy you're writing for,
Mm-hmm.
whoever the comic is, wherever the event is or whatever, sometimes they're waiting to get it from somebody else. So they
Sure.
know the longer they have, so they're stressed, you're stressed. It's this like intense gun to your head kind of situation to do
Right.
it. Which, but made me a better writer in the
Sure.
end. But
So you said you learned to write fast, almost with a metaphorical sort of time gun
Yeah.
put to your head. What did you learn about writing? Like,
one of the things I learned too is just how to process information, like, and what could be used as jokes. You know what I mean? So like,
okay.
like when I was first starting out, when you're young and you're doing it, like, you're used to writing stand up for yourself. So you're only going on stage, you kind of know
Right.
what's funny and what's at the core of it. And then when you're given like information, like a news article or whatever,
Yep.
or whatever it is, like for instance, like the sports stuff, I'm not a sports guy.
Okay.
I don't mind watching it, like
Sure.
it's fine, but I just don't know the stats. I don't know the players. And so one of the things I learned is if you know how to write a joke, you can write a joke about anything.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be inside sports to do it. And the funny thing is one of the guys I was writing for who was going on those sports shows thought I was a sports guy, which I didn't know that. I didn't know that either. Like he asked me to write for him because he was like, I think he thought I liked sports. But the entire time when we were doing that, I was like, I fucking hate this shit.
Right.
And I was like, who gives a fuck about, whatever. But
Yeah.
like I wrote in that perspective. So like I would get the kind of information on what the thing was or whatever. And I had a buddy who's a sports writer. So I would be like, why do people hate this guy? What's this
Right.
guy like? Yada, yada. But none of my jokes included like statistics or anything
Right.
like that about the game, no numbers, but I just wrote around that. So you have like, it gave me the ability to go, all right, look, here's a news story, but this line, and this line are what the crux of that is, and I can turn those into jokes. And the rest of it didn't matter because it's just about the speed and making your point and then moving
Right.
the fuck on.
Sure.
Whereas I feel like in the beginning when you're writing, you can get really bogged down by just superfluous information.
Sure. When you were doing something similar to what you just described, but for a news program or news network, someone making an appearance on a news network, how did you apply what you just said about sports to political humor or satire?
So that was a little bit different because I wasn't like, I have my political bent and I'm
Right.
an I would say extremely liberal, but not like woke liberal. You know what I mean? Like
Well, I've read your Instagram stream, and by the way, anyone listening to the sound of my voice should immediately follow John on Instagram. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
But so if you did, you would know what he's saying right now about being liberal, but not woke liberal.
Right. Yeah. And it's so, but I am very like progressive in that way or whatever. So, but you have to make sure that you're writing for who you're writing for. Sometimes the stuff that I would really want them to lean into, I had to back off on because that's not where they wanted to go.
Sure.
And it would frustrate me because I'm like, in my head, I was like, you've got this opportunity. But then I was also like, well, it's their career, their life, their job, and they don't want to piss off the host of the show or whatever it is. So that was the only frustrating thing. But other than that, I like absorbed. I was always reading politics anyway.
Right.
So it was most of the time they would send me the topics, and I'd be like, oh, okay. Like I already figured out, like, I was already reading that and writing jokes about it too. I'll tell you what the difficult thing was.
Okay.
Was because I love reading about that kind of stuff anyway, and it was just who I am, giving away a good joke. There were times where like I would already be reading whatever the fuck was going on and writing material and stuff based off of that.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden they would need me because they were going to go on a show and then go like, yeah, it's this, and this topic. And I'm like, and I would just have this like moral dilemma where I'm like, I've got a really fucking good joke. And then I would just be like, I don't think I'm going to give it to him. And I would be like, because I like it. And then there were times where I just kind of did, like, there were times where, like, I would tweet something and it would get, like, a shit ton of likes, retweets, whatever it is. And then, of course, the topic would come up, in a thing. And I'd be like, all right. I would delete the tweet.
Really?
Just so it didn't look like, anything was ripped off of me or whatever.
Right.
And then just pass the joke on and collect the money for it.
Sure.
I need the money anyway. But
Sure.
those were fucking moments where I was like, oh, it's so good. And but I was so relatively unknown anyway at the time, and young. I was like, doesn't matter if I have it. Like,
Right. What are you going to do with it anyway?
yeah, exactly. I was like, this isn't gonna put me over the edge.
Right.
Make me famous or anything like that. And this guy's already on TV. So there were moments like that where you're like battling your own ego.
Right. So what do you think makes satire or political humor work?
I think what makes it work is it's weird to say, but the audience makes it work, because
Okay.
if they're not feeling it,
Right.
like it's like, to me, political satire is about a collective cathartic feeling
Okay.
where you're like, I'm frustrated with this. Oh my God, that's a hilarious point of view. I didn't think of that about this. This makes me feel better about this momentarily.
Right.
It's just about a release. It's like, or like, not only do you feel better about it, but you can feel better about something because other people are angry about it. And that's another thing too. That's another thing satire can do for you too, is like, this is a thing that drives me fucking crazy. It makes me enraged.
Okay.
Here's this spin on it. And it's like, this is the absurdity of it. You can point it out. Everybody in the room goes, yes, fucking that's hilarious. And then, it alleviates, and it gives them a little thing to think about. It's That's what makes it work. Otherwise, I feel like then if it doesn't make that kind of connection, you're literally just screaming at people on a soapbox. Like, I think there's like a fine line.
Well, Freud suggested, and maybe he was wrong, but it seems relevant to what you're saying. Freud suggested that we're going to have a celebrity death match, John Poveromo versus Freud, fight it out in the clay ring. Oh, just he thought that humor was a way to sort of therapeutically release anxiety about taboo subjects that people can't easily talk about in their daily real lives. And one could imagine to apply that to what you just said. In a way, you need an audience who feels anxiety about what you're talking about. Like,
and for the most part, they all do. Like,
yes.
But that's the craziest thing, though. Like, that's a good point that you said about, what Freud had said about comedy or whatever, because when I talk about, like, saying I'm liberal but I'm not woke liberal, I know that, like, creates some kind of, emotional stir with, like, especially, like, people who are younger or whatever. But what I usually mean by that is, like, there's a tug of war going on for how like, mentally unstable people can be, especially on the internet and Twitter, where I feel like they're not really dealing with their mental health well. And it shows because, like, comedy is a way of dealing with a variety of mental health issues, but also anxiety, depression, fear.
Sure.
And comedians are the people that are putting that at the forefront.
Right.
And taking all that. And the people who are laughing at it are also trying to alleviate themselves or whatever. So that's a huge coping mechanism.
Yes.
And what I find so bizarre about how woke culture tends to be and the internet tends to be is that there's a group of people going, I don't want you to deal with your emotions that way.
Right.
I don't want you to cope that way.
Right.
You need to cope the way I feel, the way things make me feel better. These are also the same people who are like, we should be more sensitive. Well, this is how a collection of people fucking deal with their emotions, by talking about death and cancer and their rape stories and their fucking inability to get hard, whatever it is.
Yep.
Like, and they don't acknowledge it as a coping mechanism. So I'm like, how woke can you possibly be, or how sensitive can you possibly be, if you don't understand that there are a myriad of ways for people to deal with their mental instability?
For your own act, when you're grappling with current events,
yes,
do you have a craft for writing about satire, or just is it the same as writing any other type of joke, or how do you approach the subject?
Basically, like, all jokes, whether you're writing about satire or anything else, need to follow the same, I feel like, same joke pattern. You know what I mean? Like, whether people want to admit it or not, like, even people who are like free form still have to have the same basic rhythm of, like, a shecky. You know what I mean? Like, people, so those are all the same beats. It's all the same beats. It's just a different way of doing it. As far as like it all comes from, like, how I feel about the topic and processing or whatever. Like, I'm not a big fan of, like, sometimes my manager or whatever will be like, hey, he'll send me a news article, be like, hey, you should have an opinion on this. And I hate that shit.
Right.
Because I'm like, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I don't like generating faux outrage just to go on stage and talk about something current. But what's in my act is stuff I am passionate about. So that comes easy to me to make that into a joke. What I do, and I'm sure you do this too, or most people do when they're on stage, is I normally don't lead with it unless I'm in I'm in like a place where the audience is cool with that.
Sure.
It's one of the only times I think I don't want to say placate, but it's one of the only times I make that adjustment.
Sure.
Where like when I'm in DC,
Right.
I can absolutely lead with political material. I
Yes.
can absolutely go up with just
Right.
this is what's going on, this is how I feel, and it's fine. They love that shit.
Right.
You know, and they're smart and they're usually young and whatever. You know, if I'm in Oklahoma,
Right.
I do not do that. But
No.
but I still do my material. Like so, I still would do like I'll just lead into it with personal stuff first, and then
Yeah.
once they like me enough,
Yes, the like me. That's
You know.
the key if you're
Yeah.
on the road. When you're at a venue with random people, you want to
Yeah.
make sure they like you before you take them anywhere tricky.
Exactly. And the difference is, do you still take them? Do you still take them regardless of? I don't ever change my act.
Okay.
Like, so I don't leave anything out.
Okay.
I may adjust like perception of stuff here and there a little bit, but I still leave it in no matter where I am, which is why I've gotten threatened in Phoenix and
Oh.
Michigan, and like had several issues
Yep.
in certain places. But
I do something a little different than what you're describing because I have two different acts.
okay,
So I have what I call my feature club act. So
Mm-hmm.
Mark comes out to the Funny Stop in Cuyahoga Falls. Shout out to Pete. We all love Pete who runs the Funny Stop.
Ooh,
I don't know if you've ever been there before or not, but
I've never been there. No,
ask Mark about it. He'll give you the full skinny. Past couple years, I usually feature for Mark.
nice.
So when I'm featuring for somebody, I feel like I don't want to derail the show. I feel like I'm like the warm-up comic.
Sure. I have a weird relationship with that kind of stuff too.
Mhm.
Like if it were me, like I respect that you
Mhm.
like the idea, and for most of the time, like there's stuff I'll leave out if I am opening for somebody where I'm like, it might not be a good idea. I'll just do whatever.
Right.
And then there's also a part of me that's like, if they can't follow that, why are they headlining?
Sure. Yes.
You ever get that like
Yes.
attitude about it where you're like, I'm a very I like to riff with the audience.
Sure.
And I like doing the crowd work stuff, but it's not, hey, where are you from? How are you? First of all, it's boring to do the same shit every day.
Sure.
And when I started doing stand up, I liked doing that. Like I like being off the cuff. Like that's why I like that Telethon thing too, because it is just rapid fire, whatever comes to your mind.
Yeah.
I pride myself on being quick. I like it.
Yep.
And I like staying sharp. When I was starting out doing stand up, I used to go on stage with like 3 jokes that I knew would work and then not do anything and then try to survive.
Sure.
And that made me stronger on stage, and I didn't particularly care whether
You're right.
a boner
Exactly.
thought I was good or not, or like I would get things like if it went really well, they would be like, I can't believe you're this young and you're that comfortable on stage and you're that quick on stage. And if it didn't go well, they would be like, you're way too green to work here again. This is not going to work
Right.
for you. So getting those mixed things, I would be like, it literally just depends on whatever, and I don't care what anybody else thinks. So I had this weird at it, like, but I do like.
Well,
fucking around.
John Oliver said interesting thing recently. I think he was on the Colbert Show last week, relative to when we were recording this. So John Oliver was on the Colbert Show earlier this year, and he just made the comment that because Stephen Colbert didn't come from stand-up, he came from like sketch and improv, but
Yeah.
John Oliver comes
Yeah,
from
he never
stand-up.
did
John Oliver said, once you've bombed about 10 times, no one can hurt you anymore. Like,
Oh yeah, no.
no, nothing is going to happen at this show, good or bad. Well, good is
Right.
good, but nothing bad is going to happen at this show that's going to affect me.
That's so true. It's not, and nothing. That's the best thing though too. That's like not only can nothing in that show hurt you, but when you bomb that many times in front of strangers of different sizes,
Yeah.
like 200 people, 300 people, nothing can really hurt you in life. Like there's nothing anybody can say to me, close to me or distant to me
Right.
that will affect. I'm like, I
Right.
don't really give a fuck.
So you didn't have an orgasm. At least you didn't bomb in front of 200 strangers, like.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
not that big a deal. I enjoy creating something out of nothing in the room when somebody
Yes.
says something or somebody calls out,
Yeah.
or if I can work off of a joke, off of an audience
Right.
member, off of whatever. Like I do encourage that kind of stuff, and some comics can't do it, so it scares the
Right.
shit out of them.
What other comedians who do satire do you think do it really well? Like, who would you point at and go, that's the gold standard
Yeah.
for satire right now?
Oh my god! So I would always look at like Jon Stewart, Lewis Black.
Okay, sure.
Those guys who like it's almost like when those guys do it so well, John Oliver, like you're like, well, why am I?
Exactly.
Well, you don't need to add it more. And Bill Maher, I loved Bill Maher when I was growing up. Those guys are hilarious. And then there's like Michelle Wolf when
Sure.
she does, when she did the correspondence.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Classic.
I
One of the
I
best
grew up
ones
when
ever.
Colbert did it. So those guys are always brilliant to me. I mean, I'm sure there's more that I'm missing.
There's an interview that Colbert did about that, his correspondence dinner. It's just to boil down to the comment that he made that I want to share is
Sure.
he was repeating that someone had said to him, like, yeah, you really stuck it to him. You just said whatever, that's like brave speech, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And Stephen Colbert's response was, it's important to me that people laugh. Like, the joke is the important thing. I'm not
Yes.
just there to rant at the president or something. I'm there
Right.
to tell jokes. And so if I need the jokes to work and the jokes people to laugh, or else what I'm there to do is not working. And it was just
Yeah.
sort of funny for him to like remind the interviewer that it's
Yeah.
not just about, I don't know, telling off a politician. He's a comedian. It's jokes.
Yes. And that's the craziest thing is too is like everything he did in that was hilarious. If you're a comedian, if you understand humor, you know how crazy hard it was for him to craft that thing.
Yep.
But for the people who desperately needed that administration to get a public spanking,
Yes.
they didn't care if it was funny or not. They
Correct.
thought that guy was ranting. Like
Yes.
they thought he was like giving it to them. And then, but if you're a comic, like if it's not done artfully, there's no point in doing it.
Yes. Yep.
And people don't understand that.
Well, let me ask you a question that's similar to that piggybacks off what you just said.
Sure.
You're an experienced, seasoned headliner and 1/7 co-host of Drinks, Jokes, and Storytelling.
Yeah. 1/7. 1/7 makes it sound so great.
Well, I know how to build up my guests.
That's so good. 1/7.
But what I wanted to ask is, if you were at the back of the room at like an open mic or with younger, less experienced comedians, and someone was trying some political or religious stuff and, bombing, what advice would you give a young comedian on how to do satire right or better or?
Well, right or better. I mean, if they were, are they bombing because they're not confident? If they're bombing because they're not confident in their material, but their material is still good and there's substance there,
Right.
I would tell them to keep going and not to worry so much about it, because I think it is important to do that kind of younger,
Right.
because the earlier you start doing that and having those opinions and being confident enough to say them in front of strangers, the fucking better at it you're going to be
Right.
when you're older. Almost same with doing any kind of joke anyway. If they're bombing at it and the jokes are not good, I would say to just try to work on what their opinion of it is. Because usually when comedians who are younger and try to do satire bomb at it because the jokes aren't good, it's because their opinion on it isn't fully formed. Like, I don't know if you feel like the same experience, but like where you're like, oh, that's like a half, like the joke's not working because he doesn't feel for it.
Right.
Like he just thinks, here's my topic. Yeah, I feel like that's a misstep I see all the time. Is like they think, oh, this is what's going on. I should probably feel this way about it, and there's no passion towards it.
As we crawl towards a close here, is there anything about satire you want to say that we haven't gotten to yet?
There's always a debate on how effective it is at toppling a, regime or anything
Sure.
like that. I just want, like, one of the things I always think when people have that debate is like, I don't think it's about toppling it. I think it's about taking care of the people more. Like, yeah, maybe once in a while something breaks through and has such a massive impact that it
Sure.
changes a little bit here and there. But I think like the overall job of satire is to just let everyone kind of know you're not alone.
Sure.
We're all feeling the same shit. We all kind of think, the same thing here.
Okay.
And it's a release. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
if I think if people focus too hard on like whether it succeeds or fails at changing a thing,
Sure.
you're going to feel miserable. But you
Right.
just are, because how often does it actually work? You know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
how many years did Jon Stewart spend going after Fox News?
Yes.
Fox News is still around, but we all feel like at least we're not insane.
Yes.
Because if you don't have that and
Right.
you're only watching Fox News and you're only with your fucking family every Thanksgiving, you're like, I must be a lunatic.
Right.
Because everyone else is like, they think
Sure.
Sean Hannity's a god. But
I mean, yes. I mean, again, it's sort of coming back to that comedy experience for the audience as being therapeutic.
yeah,
You even make a little community together in the show. We sometimes say that about the theater, like the audience is a temporary community.
yes,
And they have a shared experience, and maybe they need that release just to laugh. Even if they're pro, Trump, doesn't mean they don't have anxiety about life.
yeah, and like a lot of the message. So like I'll post a lot of stuff on Facebook, and sometimes it's like literally just my opinion. Like especially during this pandemic, like I'm not trying to get on a thing or whatever. I have opinions, and I'm going to express them and use my social media, yada yada yada. When I do write jokes about that kind of stuff too, like the messages that I get from people are like, "That's hilarious," and "Thank God you said that. I thought I was the only one." So again, it just comes back to a community thing where you're like, Oh yeah, no, like I like making these jokes and saying these things in a way because there are people do think that like, oh, I'm the only one who thinks this.
And so if anyone out there who's a John Poveromo fan, you are not the only one who thinks that way. There are more of you who think he's funny. It's not just you. There's a whole community.
Yes, there's a bunch of us
of like-minded.
We're all short and we have a lot of hair.
Yeah, that's a lot of hair. All right, John. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to me. I really appreciate you coming on and talking comedy and satire and everything else we talked about.
Thank you, dude. Yeah, it was a blast. I love doing this.
Thank you very much, John. I really appreciated the talk, really appreciated the insight, really appreciated hearing about his writing gigs for comedians who are appearing on news talk shows. Anyway, do check out his Instagram, his Facebook, some of his artwork, some of his t-shirts. If coronavirus allows, make sure you go check him out live. I'll have a link to his website and all that good stuff down in the description of this podcast. Hey, so let's finish this darn thing up. Besides thanking the wonderful John Poveromo, I want to thank my musicians who produced my theme music. That's Mark Bell on the organ playing Bach, remixed by my friend, audio engineer Jeff Geddert. Thank you, gentlemen. I just love Season 2's theme music. And Jeff also helps me out with some of the post-production and writing chores of this podcast. Thank you, Jeff, for doing that. Most of all, if you made it all the way to the end of this podcast, thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to tell your friends about us, share what we do, put it up on your social media. If you tell two people and they tell two people, we can all be in a shampoo commercial from the 70s together. And if you have questions or comments, always send them in to thecomicalheathen@gmail.com. And later in the year, hopefully we'll get some live dates secured. And I'll see you out on the road. Till then, just remember, it may be your dogma, but it's my karma. And I'm all about spreading the love.